Lieutenant Sarah Martinez had always known that being one of the few women in naval special operations would bring challenges, but nothing prepared her for the moment Admiral Richardson walked into the briefing room that Tuesday morning in San Diego. The 62-year-old officer carried himself with the rigid posture of someone who had never questioned the old ways, his steel-gray eyes scanning the assembled SEALs with disapproval that seemed to settle particularly on her. The briefing room fell silent as Richardson took his position at the front. Sarah sat among her SEAL teammates, members of Team 7 who had welcomed her with the same respect they showed any operator who had earned their place through blood, sweat, and determination. She had completed the grueling training pipeline, proven herself in combat operations across 3 deployments, and earned decorations for valor that spoke louder than any words could. "I've been reviewing the recent performance reports from this unit," Admiral Richardson began, his voice cutting through the air like a blade. "And I have to say, I'm concerned about certain modifications to our traditional standards." Master Chief Petty Officer James Rodriguez, a 20-year veteran who led the team, straightened in his chair. He had seen officers like Richardson before, men who viewed progress as weakness and change as betrayal of sacred traditions. Rodriguez knew exactly what the Admiral was implying, and his jaw tightened imperceptibly. Sarah felt the weight of every gaze in the room, though her teammates' looks conveyed support rather than judgment. She had earned her place here through the same trials that had broken countless men. The Hell Week that nearly killed her, the months of advanced tactical training, the live-fire exercises where split-second decisions meant life or death. She had saved lives, completed impossible missions, and proven that gender had nothing to do with capability when bullets started flying. "Lieutenant Martinez," Admiral Richardson said, his tone formal but loaded with implications. "Step forward." Sarah rose from her chair with fluid grace, her combat boots silent on the polished floor. At 28, she stood 5'6", but carried herself with the confidence of someone who had stared down death and won. Her dark hair was pulled back in regulation style, her uniform crisp and bearing the insignia she had earned through sacrifice and skill. "Sir," she responded, meeting his gaze directly. Richardson walked slowly around her like a predator circling prey. "Tell me, Lieutenant, do you believe standards should be lowered to accommodate diversity initiatives?" The question hung in the air like toxic smoke. Every person in that room understood the subtext. This wasn't about standards or performance. This was about a powerful man uncomfortable with change, using his position to challenge someone he viewed as an outsider. Sarah's voice remained steady, professional. "Sir, I believe standards should remain high for everyone who wears this uniform. I've never asked for special treatment, nor have I received any." "Haven't you?" Richardson's eyebrows raised in mock surprise. "Because from where I sit, it looks like political correctness has infiltrated even our most elite units." The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Rodriguez felt his hands clench into fists beneath the table. Petty Officer First Class Marcus Thompson, a mountain of a man who had served alongside Sarah in Afghanistan, shifted forward slightly in his chair. The disrespect being shown to their teammate was intolerable. "Admiral," Master Chief Rodriguez interjected carefully, "Lieutenant Martinez has exemplary performance records. Her last fitness report—" "I didn't ask for your input, Master Chief," Richardson snapped. "I'm addressing concerns about maintaining our warrior ethos in the face of social experimentation." Sarah could feel the anger radiating from her teammates, but she also knew this was her fight. She had faced doubt and skepticism her entire career, from the moment she first expressed interest in special operations to the day she graduated from the pipeline. Each challenge had made her stronger, more determined to prove that excellence knew no gender. "Sir, with respect," Sarah said, her voice calm but firm, "my record speaks for itself. 3 combat deployments, 14 successful direct action missions, 2 Bronze Stars with valor, and the complete trust of my teammates. I didn't earn my place here through politics or lowered standards. I earned it the same way every person in this room did, through dedication, sacrifice, and performance under fire. Admiral Richardson's face flushed slightly. He wasn't accustomed to being challenged, especially by someone he viewed as a symbol of unwelcome change. Performance under fire? Let me tell you something, Lieutenant. I've been in this Navy for 38 years. I've seen what happens when we start making exceptions, when we prioritize headlines over hardening. Then you should know, Sarah responded, that the enemy doesn't care about my gender when they're shooting at me. They only care that I'm American military, and I've never given them reason to think I was anything less than lethal. The Admiral's expression darkened further. He had expected compliance, perhaps even tears or backing down. Instead, he faced a steel resolve that matched his own, backed by achievements he couldn't dismiss despite his prejudices. Your teammates, he said, gesturing broadly at the assembled SEALs, do they really trust you when everything goes bad? When it's life or death, do they want you watching their six? Or do they wish they had a real operator beside them? It was a calculated insult, designed to isolate her from her team and plant seeds of doubt. But Admiral Richardson had miscalculated badly. He didn't understand the brotherhood forged in combat, the bonds created when people risk everything for each other. Master Chief Rodriguez could no longer contain himself. Admiral, that's completely out of line. Lieutenant Martinez has— Stand down, Master Chief, Richardson barked. This is between me and the lieutenant. But the damage was done. The Admiral had revealed his true feelings, his assumption that a woman couldn't be a real operator regardless of her qualifications or achievements. The insult hung in the air like a physical presence, poisoning the atmosphere with its casual cruelty. Sarah felt something shift inside her. Not anger exactly, but a crystalline clarity about what she was facing. This wasn't about her performance or capabilities. This was about an old guard desperate to maintain power by excluding those they deemed unworthy, regardless of merit. Sir, she said, her voice carrying a new edge, I understand your concerns about maintaining standards, but I would suggest that questioning the competence of decorated combat veterans based on their gender rather than their actions might be the real threat to our warrior ethos. The room fell completely silent. In 38 years of service, Admiral Richardson had rarely been challenged so directly, especially by a junior officer. His face turned red with rage and embarrassment. You're walking a very thin line, Lieutenant, he said through gritted teeth. No, sir, Sarah replied, meeting his stare without flinching. I'm standing exactly where I've earned the right to stand. Richardson turned to address the room. This is exactly what I'm talking about, insubordination disguised as equality. In my day, officers knew their place and respected the chain of command. In your day, Petty Officer Thompson said quietly, women weren't allowed to prove what they were capable of. The Admiral whirled to face Thompson. Did I give you permission to speak, Petty Officer? No, sir, but— Then shut your mouth before I have you written up for insubordination. The threat silenced Thompson, but it couldn't silence the looks being exchanged around the room. Every SEAL present had served with Sarah Martinez. They had seen her drag wounded teammates to safety under fire, watched her make impossible shots in impossible circumstances, relied on her tactical brilliance in situations where failure meant death. Admiral Richardson sensed he was losing control of the situation. These men weren't responding the way he expected. Instead of nodding along with his assessment, they were clearly supporting the woman he was trying to marginalize. Let me make something clear to all of you, he said, his voice rising. The traditions of this organization exist for a reason. They've been tested in blood across generations of warriors. When we start making exceptions, when we prioritize political agendas over proven methods, we put lives at risk. Whose life has Lieutenant Martinez put at risk? Master Chief Rodriguez asked quietly. Richardson's eyes narrowed. Are you questioning my judgment, Master Chief? I'm asking a simple question, sir. In 3 years of combat operations with this team, has Lieutenant Martinez ever put a single life at risk through incompetence or inability? The question hung in the air unanswered because Admiral Richardson couldn't provide a single example. Sarah's record was spotless, her performance exemplary. But facts had never been the real issue here. This isn't about individual performance, Richardson said, shifting tactics. This is about unit cohesion, about maintaining the standards that have made us the premier fighting force in the world. Unit cohesion? Rodriguez's voice carried a dangerous edge now. Sir, with all due respect, the only threat to unit cohesion I see in this room is the suggestion that one of our most capable operators doesn't belong here because of her gender. Admiral Richardson realized he had walked into a trap of his own making. By attacking Sarah so directly, he had forced her teammates to choose sides, and their choice was becoming increasingly clear with every passing moment. Sarah watched the exchange with mixed emotions. She was grateful for her teammates' support, but she also knew this confrontation would have consequences. Admiral Richardson was not a man who accepted challenges gracefully, and he had the power to make life very difficult for all of them. I think we've heard enough, Richardson said finally, his voice tight with barely controlled rage. Lieutenant Martinez, you and I will continue this conversation privately. The rest of you are dismissed. The SEALs began to file out reluctantly, each man making eye contact with Sarah as they passed. Their message was clear. They had her back, regardless of what came next. As the room emptied, Sarah found herself alone with Admiral Richardson and Master Chief Rodriguez, who had remained behind despite the dismissal. Master Chief, I said you were dismissed, Richardson repeated. Sir, as senior enlisted advisor for this team, I believe I should remain for any discussion regarding my personnel. Richardson's jaw worked silently for several seconds. He was clearly frustrated by Rodriguez's insistence on staying, but he also knew that military protocol supported the Master Chief's position. Fine, he said finally, but let me make something crystal clear to both of you. This conversation never happened, and if I hear so much as a whisper about it outside this room, there will be consequences. Sarah and Rodriguez exchanged glances. The Admiral was already trying to control the narrative to prevent word of his unprofessional behavior from spreading up the chain of command. Now, Richardson continued, let's discuss your future, Lieutenant Martinez, because after this little display of insubordination, I'm questioning whether you have one in Naval Special Operations. The threat was unmistakable. Admiral Richardson was essentially telling Sarah that unless she accepted his assessment and backed down, he would use his considerable influence to end her career. Sarah had a choice to make. She could apologize, accept the Admiral's characterization of her as a diversity hire rather than an earned member of the team, and hope to salvage what remained of her career. Or she could continue to stand her ground, knowing that doing so might cost her everything she had worked for. She thought about the young women who would come after her, who were watching to see if it was possible to succeed in this world without compromising their dignity or accepting second-class status. She thought about her teammates, who deserved leaders who valued merit over prejudice. Most importantly, she thought about the oath she had taken to defend her country with honor and integrity. Sir, she said finally, I've spent my entire career earning respect through performance and dedication. I won't start accepting unearned disrespect now, regardless of the consequences. Admiral Richardson smiled, but there was no warmth in it. I was hoping you'd say that, Lieutenant, because it makes what comes next so much easier. The word spread through the Naval Special Warfare compound like wildfire, carried by the barely contained fury of men who had witnessed something that violated every principle they held sacred. Within hours of Admiral Richardson's confrontation with Lieutenant Sarah Martinez, every SEAL on the base knew what had happened in that briefing room. Petty Officer First Class Marcus Thompson was the first to act. The 6'4" former college linebacker found Master Chief Rodriguez in the armory, methodically cleaning his weapon with the focused intensity of a man working through complex emotions. "Chief," Thompson said, closing the door behind him, "we need to talk." Rodriguez looked up from his rifle, noting the determination in Thompson's eyes. "I figured you'd be by soon enough. How many others are asking questions?" "All of them," Thompson replied without hesitation. "Every guy who served with Martinez is asking the same thing. What are we going to do about this?" Rodriguez set down his cleaning rod and leaned back in his chair. At 45, he had seen enough politics and prejudice to know how these situations typically played out. Good people got crushed by powerful men who faced no consequences for their actions. But he had also learned that sometimes, when the right people stood together, even admirals could be held accountable. "What exactly are you suggesting, Thompson?" "I'm suggesting we don't let that old dinosaur railroad one of our own," Thompson said. "Martinez has earned her place here 10 times over. She's pulled my ass out of the fire more than once, and I'm not about to stand by while some desk jockey who hasn't seen combat in 20 years questions her worth." Rodriguez nodded slowly. "And the others feel the same way?" "Chief, yesterday in Fallujah, Martinez put herself between me and an IED to push me clear of the blast. She took shrapnel in 3 places and still managed to call in air support while I was flat on my ass seeing stars. You think I'm going to let Richardson trash her reputation because he's uncomfortable with change?" The Master Chief had heard similar stories from every member of the team. Sarah Martinez hadn't just met the standards, she had exceeded them consistently, earning the kind of respect that couldn't be manufactured or faked. It was the respect reserved for those who had proven themselves when everything was on the line. "All right," Rodriguez said finally, "but we do this smart. Richardson has friends in high places, and if we move wrong, we'll all get buried along with Martinez." Meanwhile, in another part of the compound, Petty Officer Second Class David Kim was having a similar conversation with Senior Chief William Bull Morrison. Morrison was a legend in SEAL circles, a man who had served for 22 years and earned every decoration the Navy had to offer. His opinion carried weight throughout the Special Operations community. "Senior Chief," Kim said, "I've been thinking about what happened today and I can't let it slide." Morrison, a man of few words but decisive action, simply nodded. "Neither can I." "Martinez saved my life in Syria," Kim continued. "We were pinned down by enemy fire, cut off from our extraction point. She crawled through 50 meters of open ground under machine gun fire to reach an overwatch position. Her covering fire was the only thing that got us out alive." "I remember reading the after-action report," Morrison said. "Textbook tactical thinking under extreme pressure. So why is Richardson treating her like she doesn't belong? She's proven herself over and over again." Morrison had been asking himself the same question. He had served with hundreds of operators over his career, and Sarah Martinez ranked among the best he had ever seen. Her tactical acumen was exceptional, her physical conditioning was superior to most of the men on the team, and her mental toughness was unquestionable. "Because Richardson is scared," Morrison said finally. "Scared? Of what?" "Of being proven wrong. Of admitting that his worldview is outdated. Of acknowledging that maybe, just maybe, he's been wrong about women in combat roles for his entire career." Kim nodded, understanding. "So what do we do?" Morrison was quiet for a long moment, thinking through the implications of what they were considering. "We remind him that loyalty runs both ways in this organization. Martinez has been loyal to us, shown courage for us, bled for us. Now it's our turn." By evening, an impromptu meeting had formed in the team's common area. 8 SEALs sat in a loose circle, their conversation hushed but intense. These were men who had faced terrorists, enemy soldiers, and impossible odds without flinching. But confronting their own leadership structure was a different kind of battle entirely. Petty Officer Jake Sullivan, the team's communications specialist, spoke up first. "Look, we all know what this is about. Richardson can't handle the fact that a woman is better at this job than half the men he's commanded over the years. It's not just that she's good," added Petty Officer Tom Bradley, the team medic. "She's exceptional. I've seen her make shots that most snipers couldn't make, devise tactical solutions that saved all our lives. Richardson is essentially saying that none of that matters because she's a woman." Master Chief Rodriguez had been listening to the conversation, weighing options and consequences. Finally, he stood up, commanding the attention of everyone in the room. "Gentlemen, we're talking about taking a stand against an admiral. That's not something you do lightly, and it's not something you can take back once you start. Before we go any further, I need to know that everyone understands what we're risking." The room fell silent as each man considered the implications. Challenging Admiral Richardson could end careers, result in court-martial proceedings, and destroy their futures in the military. But the alternative, allowing a decorated combat veteran to be persecuted because of prejudice, was unacceptable to all of them. Thompson spoke first. "Chief, Martinez put her career on the line every time she went into combat with us. The least we can do is put ours on the line for her." One by one, the others voiced their agreement. These weren't rash young men acting on emotion. These were seasoned professionals who had carefully considered the risks and decided that some things were worth fighting for. "All right then," Rodriguez said. "Here's what we're going to do." The plan they developed was both simple and audacious. Rather than working through official channels that Richardson could control or manipulate, they would take their case directly to the people who mattered most, the SEAL community itself. Senior Chief Morrison would reach out to his network of contacts throughout naval special warfare, ensuring that Martinez's real record and achievements were known at every level. Kim would document every mission where Martinez had performed exceptionally, creating an undeniable record of her contributions. Thompson and Bradley would gather statements from the medical personnel who had treated wounded SEALs that Martinez had saved or protected. But the most important part of the plan involved a symbolic gesture that would send a clear message about where their loyalties lay. "Tomorrow morning," Rodriguez explained, "Richardson is scheduled to conduct the inspection of the training facility. He'll be expecting us to fall in line, to pretend that nothing happened. Instead, we're going to show him exactly what we think of his assessment of our teammate." The next morning arrived gray and overcast, the Southern California marine layer casting everything in muted tones. Admiral Richardson arrived at the training facility at precisely 800, his staff car pulling up to the main entrance with military precision. As he stepped out of the vehicle, Richardson noticed something unusual. Normally, when a senior officer conducted an inspection, personnel would be arranged in formal formations, everything crisp and regulation. Instead, he saw clusters of SEALs engaged in what appeared to be normal training activities. Richardson's aide, Lieutenant Commander James Walsh, looked around nervously. "Sir, it seems like they weren't expecting us." "They were expecting us," Richardson replied grimly. "This is another little game." As the Admiral and his entourage walked across the training area, the SEALs began to take notice of his presence. But instead of immediately snapping to attention as protocol demanded, they continued their activities while watching him approach. Master Chief Rodriguez was overseeing a combat shooting exercise, his team running through close-quarters battle drills with live ammunition. The sharp crack of gunfire punctuated the morning air as operators moved through the shoot house with lethal precision. "Master Chief Rodriguez," Admiral Richardson called out, his voice carrying over the sound of the exercise. Rodriguez held up a hand to pause the training, then walked over to where the Admiral stood. "Sir?" I trust there are no issues with discipline or morale following yesterday's discussion? Rodriguez met the Admiral's gaze steadily. No issues at all, sir. The team understands exactly where we stand. Richardson nodded, satisfied that his message had been received. He began walking toward the next training area, where SEALs were conducting fast rope exercises from a hovering helicopter. But as he moved through the compound, Richardson began to notice something that made his blood pressure rise. The SEALs weren't ignoring him exactly, but they weren't showing him the deference he expected either. Conversations continued as he passed. Men looked at him directly without the usual signs of respect or intimidation. It was Petty Officer Thompson who provided the first clear indication of what was happening. As Admiral Richardson approached a group of SEALs conducting physical training, Thompson finished his set of pull-ups and dropped to the ground. Instead of coming to attention, he simply nodded in the Admiral's direction. "Petty Officer Thompson," Richardson said sharply, "when a senior officer approaches, what is the appropriate response?" Thompson looked around at his teammates, then back at the Admiral. "Sir, I believe the appropriate response is to show respect for those who have earned it." The implied insult hung in the air like smoke from an explosion. Richardson felt his face flush with anger, but before he could respond, he noticed something else that made his heart rate spike. Lieutenant Sarah Martinez was approaching from across the training area, her uniform immaculate, her bearing confident. She had clearly been conducting weapons maintenance, her rifle slung across her shoulder in perfect regulation style. But it wasn't Martinez's presence that caught Richardson's attention. It was what happened as she walked past the assembled SEALs. One by one, the operators began to straighten up, their casual postures shifting to positions of respect and attention. Not for Admiral Richardson, who stood mere feet away in his pressed uniform and polished insignia, but for the woman he had tried to shame and diminish just 24 hours earlier. Thompson was the first to render a perfect military salute, his right hand snapping to his forehead with precision that would have made a drill instructor proud. Kim followed immediately, then Bradley, then Morrison. Within seconds, 8 of the Navy's most elite warriors were saluting Lieutenant Sarah Martinez while completely ignoring Admiral Richardson. The message was unmistakable and devastating. These men were telling their admiral, in the most public and undeniable way possible, that they respected Martinez's leadership and rejected his assessment of her worth. Richardson felt his world tilt on its axis. In 38 years of service, he had never been so thoroughly and publicly repudiated. The SEALs weren't just defending their teammate, they were declaring their independence from his authority and judgment. Martinez, for her part, returned each salute with professional precision, acknowledging the support of her teammates while maintaining the dignity that had carried her through every challenge of her career. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Richardson exploded, his voice carrying across the training area. Master Chief Rodriguez stepped forward, his own hand moving to render a salute to Martinez. "Sir, we're showing proper respect for a decorated combat veteran and trusted teammate." "You will not salute a junior officer in my presence unless ordered to do so." "With respect, Admiral," Rodriguez replied. "We salute those who have earned our respect through service and sacrifice. Rank alone isn't sufficient." Richardson realized he was losing control completely. The careful power structure he had spent decades building was crumbling before his eyes, undermined by the stubborn loyalty of men who refused to abandon their principles for his prejudices. "All of you will face disciplinary action for this insubordination," he threatened. Senior Chief Morrison stepped forward, adding his salute to the others. "Sir, documenting our respect for Lieutenant Martinez's service record isn't insubordination. It's recognition of excellence." The standoff continued for several long moments, 8 SEALs maintaining their salutes to Martinez, while their admiral stood ignored and furious. Finally, Martinez herself broke the tension. "Gentlemen," she said quietly, "thank you." The simple words carried more weight than any speech or proclamation. In thanking her teammates for their support, Martinez was acknowledging not just their gesture, but their courage in making it. As the SEALs lowered their salutes, Admiral Richardson realized that he faced a choice. He could attempt to carry out his threats, try to discipline the entire team for showing respect to a fellow warrior. But doing so would require him to explain to his superiors why 8 decorated combat veterans had chosen to openly defy him in support of an officer he was trying to marginalize. Richardson's aide whispered urgently in his ear, reminding him that their inspection schedule was falling behind and that other duties awaited. The Admiral knew he needed to retreat and regroup, to find another way to deal with what he saw as an intolerable challenge to his authority. "This isn't over," he said finally, his voice tight with barely controlled rage. Rodriguez nodded calmly. "No, sir, it isn't." As Admiral Richardson and his entourage departed, the SEALs remained clustered around Martinez. They had crossed a line that morning, taken a stand that would have consequences, but they had also sent a clear message that would resonate throughout the naval special warfare community. Excellence and courage would be recognized and protected, regardless of gender. And anyone who tried to diminish their teammates based on prejudice rather than performance would face the unified resistance of America's most elite warriors. The battle was far from over, but the first shots had been fired. And surprisingly, it wasn't the Admiral who had taken the high ground. The phone call came at 06:30, 3 days after the saluting incident that had become legend throughout the naval special warfare community. Vice Admiral Patricia Hawkins, commander of Naval Special Warfare Command, had heard enough whispered conversations and second-hand reports to know that something significant was happening in San Diego. "Admiral Richardson," her voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to cutting through military bureaucracy, "I need to see you in my office at 0900 and bring the Martinez file." Richardson had been expecting this call, but that didn't make it any less unwelcome. Vice Admiral Hawkins was known throughout the Navy as a straight shooter who had little patience for politics or personal agendas. She had earned her position through competence and integrity, rising through the ranks during an era when women faced even more barriers than they did today. As Richardson prepared for the meeting, he tried to construct a narrative that would justify his actions. But every angle he considered seemed to lead back to the same uncomfortable truth. He had allowed personal bias to override professional judgment, and his subordinates had called him on it in the most public way possible. Meanwhile, at the SEAL compound, the atmosphere had shifted dramatically. Word of the confrontation had spread throughout the special operations community, creating ripples that reached far beyond San Diego. Senior Chief Morrison had been fielding calls from SEALs stationed around the world, all wanting to know the details of what had happened and what it meant for the future. "Chief," Petty Officer Thompson approached Morrison during the morning physical training session, "my buddy at Team 6 says they're talking about this all the way up at Dam Neck. Says the whole community is watching to see how this plays out." Morrison nodded grimly. "That's what I figured. When SEALs start publicly defying admirals, people pay attention." The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Master Chief Rodriguez, who had just returned from a meeting with the base commander. His expression was unreadable, but the tension in his shoulders suggested the news wasn't entirely positive. "Gentlemen," Rodriguez called out, gathering the team around him, "I just got word from upstairs. There's going to be an investigation." The announcement sent a ripple of concern through the group. Military investigations could be career-ending affairs, especially when they involved charges of insubordination against senior officers. "What kind of investigation?" Kim asked. "The kind where everyone gets to tell their side of the story," Rodriguez replied, "and where records get examined very carefully." Thompson grinned despite the circumstances. "Well, if they're looking at records, they're going to find some interesting reading when it comes to Martinez's performance evaluations." Rodriguez had been thinking the same thing. Sarah Martinez's file was a testament to exceptional service, filled with commendations, successful mission reports, and glowing evaluations from every commander she had served under. Any investigation that examined her actual record would have difficulty supporting Admiral Richardson's implied claims about lowered standards or preferential treatment. At 0900 sharp, Admiral Richardson found himself seated across from Vice Admiral Hawkins in her spartanly decorated office. The walls held only a few photographs, Hawkins receiving her stars, leading troops in various locations around the world, and accepting commendations for service that had taken her from a young ensign to one of the Navy's most senior officers. "Admiral Richardson," Hawkins began without preamble, "I've been hearing some interesting stories about events at your facility. Would you care to explain why 8 decorated SEALs felt compelled to publicly demonstrate their lack of confidence in your leadership?" Richardson had prepared for this question, but sitting across from Hawkins made his rehearsed answers seem inadequate. "Ma'am, I was simply trying to address concerns about maintaining standards in our special operations units." "Standards?" Hawkins opened the file folder in front of her. "Let's talk about standards. Lieutenant Sarah Martinez, 3 combat deployments, 14 successful direct action missions, 2 Bronze Stars with valor, consistently superior fitness evaluations, and commendations from every commanding officer she's served under. These are the standards you're concerned about?" Richardson shifted uncomfortably. "Ma'am, it's not about individual performance. It's about unit cohesion and traditional values." "Traditional values?" Hawkins leaned back in her chair, her expression incredulous. "Admiral, let me tell you about traditional values. Honor, courage, and commitment. Loyalty to your subordinates. Recognizing excellence regardless of its source. Those are Navy values. What you demonstrated was prejudice disguised as tradition." The reprimand stung because it was accurate. Richardson had spent so much time focusing on his discomfort with change that he had lost sight of the actual performance and character of the people he was supposed to lead. "Ma'am, I understand your concern, but—" "Do you?" Hawkins interrupted. "Because from where I sit, it looks like you created a crisis where none existed. You questioned the competence of an exceptional officer based on gender rather than performance. You insulted her in front of her teammates. And when those teammates demonstrated their support for her, you threatened them with disciplinary action." Hawkins stood up and walked to the window overlooking the naval base. "Admiral, I've read the statements from Martinez's teammates. Do you know what they say about her?" Richardson remained silent, knowing that whatever the SEALs had said wouldn't support his position. "They say she's one of the finest operators they've ever served with. They describe specific instances where her tactical expertise saved lives. They detail her physical courage under fire and her mental toughness in impossible situations. They provide examples of leadership that go far beyond what's required by rank or regulation." Hawkins turned back to face Richardson. These are men who have served with hundreds of operators over their careers. Their judgment about who belongs in their ranks is earned through shared risk and mutual dependence. When they unanimously support someone, it carries more weight than any administrative opinion. The meeting continued for another hour, with Hawkins methodically dismantling every justification Richardson offered for his treatment of Martinez. By the end, he found himself facing a choice: accept responsibility for his actions and work to rebuild the trust he had damaged, or dig in deeper and face the consequences of his stubbornness. That afternoon, while Richardson was enduring his meeting with Vice Admiral Hawkins, Lieutenant Sarah Martinez was conducting an advanced tactical training exercise with a group of junior SEALs. The irony wasn't lost on her. While her qualifications were being questioned at the highest levels, she was actively engaged in training the next generation of special operators. The exercise involved a complex hostage rescue scenario requiring split-second decision-making, precise marksmanship, and flawless coordination between team members. Martinez moved through the scenario with fluid efficiency, calling out tactical commands and adjusting to changing conditions with the instinctive responses that came from years of real-world experience. "Lieutenant," one of the younger SEALs said after completing the exercise, "that was some of the best tactical instruction I've ever received. The way you adapted when the scenario changed, that's not something you can learn from a manual." Martinez smiled, but her expression remained professional. "That's what comes from doing it for real, Petty Officer Davis. Every mission teaches you something new, and hopefully you live long enough to pass those lessons on." The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Master Chief Rodriguez, who had urgent news from his meeting with the command structure. "Martinez," he said, "we need to talk." They walked to a quiet area away from the training exercise, where Rodriguez could speak freely without being overheard. "The investigation is moving faster than expected," he said. "Admiral Richardson has been relieved of his oversight responsibilities pending a full review of his conduct." Martinez felt a mixture of relief and concern. "What does that mean for the team?" "It means Vice Admiral Hawkins is taking personal interest in this situation. She's sending someone down to conduct interviews with everyone involved." "Someone?" Rodriguez smiled for the first time in days. "Captain Michael Torres. Ever heard of him?" Martinez's eyes widened. Captain Torres was legendary in SEAL circles, a former team leader who had earned the Navy Cross for extraordinary heroism in Afghanistan. His reputation for fairness and integrity was matched only by his operational expertise. "If Torres is coming, this is being taken seriously at the highest levels," she said. "That's what I figure, which means we need to be ready to tell our story clearly and completely." 2 days later, Captain Torres arrived at the San Diego compound. His presence immediately changed the atmosphere, as every SEAL on the base understood that someone of his stature wouldn't be sent unless the situation had implications far beyond a single disagreement between officers. Torres conducted individual interviews with each member of Team 7, asking detailed questions about their experiences serving with Martinez and their observations of Admiral Richardson's conduct. The interviews were thorough but fair, focusing on specific incidents and factual observations rather than opinions or speculation. When it was Thompson's turn, he found himself face to face with a man whose reputation had inspired his own decision to become a SEAL. "Petty Officer Thompson," Torres began, "tell me about Lieutenant Martinez as an operator." Thompson had prepared for this question, but sitting across from Captain Torres made him want to be particularly precise in his response. "Sir, Lieutenant Martinez is one of the finest operators I've ever served with. In 3 deployments, I've never seen her make a poor tactical decision or fail to perform under pressure. She's saved my life personally on 2 occasions and contributed to the success of every mission we've conducted together." "Can you be specific about those life-saving incidents?" Thompson described in detail the IED incident in Iraq and the firefight in Syria, where Martinez's actions had prevented casualties and enabled successful mission completion. His account was factual and measured, focusing on tactics and results rather than emotion. "And Admiral Richardson's assessment of her capabilities?" "Sir, with all due respect to the Admiral's rank and experience, his assessment was not consistent with Lieutenant Martinez's actual performance record. It appeared to be based on assumptions rather than observations." Torres conducted similar interviews with each team member, building a comprehensive picture of Martinez's service and Richardson's conduct. The pattern that emerged was unmistakable: unanimous support for Martinez's competence and growing concern about Richardson's judgment. When Torres interviewed Martinez herself, he found a professional who remained respectful toward Admiral Richardson despite his treatment of her. "Lieutenant," he said, "how would you characterize Admiral Richardson's concerns about your presence in the unit?" Martinez chose her words carefully. "Sir, I believe Admiral Richardson was expressing genuine concerns about maintaining standards. I disagree with his assessment of my capabilities, but I understand that change can be difficult for leaders who have served successfully under different circumstances. Torres was impressed by her diplomatic response, but he pressed further. Did you feel his treatment of you was professional? Sir, I felt that Admiral Richardson allowed personal biases to influence his professional judgment, but I also understand that confronting those biases takes time and experience. The investigation concluded after a week of interviews and document reviews. Torres's report was comprehensive and damning, detailing a pattern of prejudicial treatment that violated Navy regulations and undermined unit effectiveness. The consequences came swiftly. Admiral Richardson was formally reprimanded and transferred to an administrative position where his personal biases couldn't affect operational personnel. His career advancement was effectively ended, though he retained his rank and benefits. More importantly, the incident led to changes in policy and training throughout naval special warfare. Mandatory bias recognition training was implemented for all senior officers, and clear guidelines were established for evaluating personnel based on performance rather than demographics. 6 months later, Lieutenant Sarah Martinez received orders for promotion to Lieutenant Commander and assignment as Operations Officer for a newly formed Special Operations Unit. The promotion ceremony was attended by her entire team, all wearing their dress uniforms and rendering perfect salutes as she assumed her new responsibilities. Master Chief Rodriguez, who had been selected to serve as her senior enlisted advisor, spoke at the ceremony. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, addressing the assembled personnel, "today we're not just celebrating a promotion. We're celebrating the principle that excellence will be recognized and supported, regardless of its source. Commander Martinez has earned this advancement through service, sacrifice, and unwavering dedication to the mission and her teammates." Vice Admiral Hawkins, who had made a special trip to attend the ceremony, added her own remarks. "The events that brought us together today demonstrate something fundamental about military service," she said. "When we stand together based on shared values and mutual respect, we're stronger than when we're divided by prejudice and assumption. Commander Martinez and her teammates have reminded us that our strength comes not from conformity, but from our commitment to excellence." As the ceremony concluded, the SEALs of Team 7 lined up to congratulate their newly promoted leader. But their salutes carried a different meaning now, not defiance of unjust authority, but recognition of earned leadership and proven capability. Thompson was the first to approach, offering a crisp salute and a broad grin. "Congratulations, Commander. Looking forward to seeing what you do with those new bars." One by one, the others followed, each man expressing his support for a leader who had proven herself through action rather than politics. Later that evening, as the celebration wound down, Martinez found herself alone with Rodriguez, reflecting on the events that had brought them to this point. "Chief," she said, "I never asked you and the team to risk your careers for me." Rodriguez smiled. "Ma'am, you didn't have to ask. When someone watches your six for 3 years, covers your advance, and pulls you out of bad situations, you don't abandon them when some admiral gets uncomfortable. That's what loyalty means." "Still," Martinez continued, "what you all did, publicly saluting me in front of Richardson, that took real courage." "No, ma'am," Rodriguez replied. "Real courage is what you did every day for 3 years, proving yourself over and over again, never backing down, never accepting second-class treatment. All we did was recognize what was already obvious to everyone paying attention." The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Captain Torres, who had remained for the promotion ceremony and the celebration that followed. "Commander Martinez," he said, "congratulations on your promotion. I wanted to speak with you before I head back to Washington." "Thank you, sir. I appreciate everything you did during the investigation." Torres shook his head. "I didn't do anything except document what was already clear. Your record spoke for itself, and your teammates' support was overwhelming evidence of your character and competence." He paused, choosing his words carefully. What happened here will be studied for years to come, not just as an example of how to handle discrimination, but as a demonstration of what military leadership should look like. You maintained your dignity under attack, your teammates stood by their principles despite personal risk, and the system ultimately worked to protect excellence and integrity. As Torres departed, Martinez and Rodriguez stood in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over San Diego Bay. The challenge that had threatened to destroy careers and divide the team had instead strengthened their bonds and demonstrated the power of standing together for what was right. The story would indeed be studied and retold throughout the military, becoming a case study in leadership, integrity, and the courage to do what's right even when facing powerful opposition. But for the SEALs of Team 7, it was simply the latest chapter in their ongoing commitment to each other and to the values that had brought them together in service to their country. Admiral Richardson had attempted to shame Sarah Martinez and diminish her achievements. Instead, he had created a situation where her excellence was validated at the highest levels and her teammates' loyalty was tested and proven unbreakable. The SEAL's salute had been an act of defiance, but it was also something much more important. It was a declaration that merit would triumph over prejudice, and that true warriors recognize courage wherever they find it.